Filmed live in beautiful Colville, Washington. At Colville High School. At our studio in Mr. Long's classroom. Starring Mr. Long and Mr. Meyer. It's the Late Morning Show with Mr. Long and Mr. Meyer. Available exclusively on Disney Plus. We're just joking. This will be available for free. Don't get Disney Plus just to watch the show. Hey, welcome to our show. Another week of the Late Morning Show with Mr. Long and Mr. Meyer.
Another week of distance learning.
Exactly, learning. So, we're going to start by just quickly talking about what we've been up to this week. Mr. Long, what have you been up to?
Well, Mr. Meyer, I tell you what I've been up to. I've been up to eating. I don't know about you people out there, but it's like I can't, it's like comfort food. So if you don't have your favorite food, if you don't know what to try, I've been eating a lot of Golden Grahams. And it's, if you really want your Golden Grahams to go, mix them with melted chocolate and marshmallow, and instead of Rice Krispies, you have Golden Graham Krispies, which are like s'mores. So they're pretty good.
Worth their weight in gold. That's awesome.
What have you been up to?
I've been up to working on school, hanging out here, hanging out with my wife. We went for a drive the other day, and we found a neighborhood of Colville that we've never seen. It's so strange. There's like still little neighborhoods I've never seen in my entire life. It was weird.
Where was that?
We were going up the hill. It's like, Walmart, and then there's Hofstetter. It's like probably like right in the middle between those two up the hill, and there's a dead-end road, and it was really cool. And did you know that from some spots on the hill, you can see the grain elevator all the way out in Kettle Falls from Colville?
I did not know that.
The Kettle Falls skyline.
And you can go up to Colville Mountain that way.
I didn't think of that. I did not think of that.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, there's a lot to explore in our nice little neck of the woods. So last week we asked you to let us know your favorite movies when we went on our field trip, and the response has been
incredible. Favorite movies have been just flooding in. So we went to if you remember, we went to the Colville Theater last weekend, and we talked about our favorite movies, and yours is?
My favorite movie is Shrek.
Outstanding. Well, we've had people from all over the globe, believe it or not. I didn't know we were so famous.
We're pretty famous.
Sending in their favorite movies. We have a couple of them that we'd like to share with you.
Yeah. So Steven in Florida says his favorite movie is Jaws: The Revenge, Jaws 4.
Oh, I love Jaws 4. I can't get enough of really big sharks eating people. That's the greatest thing in the world.
Exactly.
I have Dustin from Morocco, who sent in his favorite, which is called Ishtar, which is about a lounge singer who's overseas.
Huh. Matt in New York said that his favorite movie is Ed, the Man and His Monkey. And it's a movie about a guy in New York
with a monkey.
With a monkey. Sounds like a great film.
I have Kirk, who sent in a movie called Saving Christmas. Kirk's from the North Pole. And it's a movie about inclusion.
Oh, that's nice. We got Ed, and he said his favorite movie is A Thousand Worlds from Bondi.
Yeah,
that's
what he wrote.
That's what Ed's favorite movie was. And thanks, Ed. Thanks for the submission. It's about a literary agent who is cursed.
Yeah, curse is bad. I have Matthew from Honolulu, of all places, who says his favorite movie is Surfer Dude.
And Tommy from San Francisco says his favorite movie is The Room, a dynamic, tragic film about a love triangle.
We are not endorsing any of these movies because I know that one's rated R. So stick with your PG or whatever, G or whatever.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Tommy, but we are not endorsing the film.
Eric from Cleveland, Ohio, sent in Mac and Me, which is supposed to be a lot like E.T.
Hey. Well, those are the movie submissions. Thanks to our fans out there for letting us know what your favorite movies are. I think we are going to get right into talking about this week's reading and assignment that goes along with that.
This week's reading is called Poison, and we are talking about the nuances of words and how last week we talked about how you can look at a story from different perspectives and see how it's changed. Is he a vandal, right, last week, or is he like a hero of the people? And I really want you to think about how we use words in ways that change their meaning a little bit, like the word poison.
Exactly. And this story is written by an author named Roald Dahl, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, perfect.
Roald Dahl, famous British writer, very influential. James and the Giant Peach, Matilda. What else did you write? Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
A lot of big, iconic stories have been written by him. Very influential on quirky fantasy literature, right?
Like Tim Burton looks like he was inspired by Roald Dahl.
There's definitely a connection between that kind of family-friendly but still a little bit frightening kind of fantasy worlds. So this story takes place in India, and it's important to note that Britain used to have empire land all over the world. And these are British guys in India who are there. We don't really know why. The story doesn't go into detail, but we can assume that they're there to work for the British government, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, so Britain was once an empire, and they had places, you may have heard of them, where they were in charge. Canada, America, India. There were multiple places that were conquered and ruled by the British. This story takes place in
India, and we kind of were guessing probably in the 1910s, 20s, pre-World War II.
Pre-World War II, we're thinking.
Yeah. So keep in mind the setting and the context for the story, and keep in mind the nuance of the meaning of the word, especially the title poison. Let's try to really dig into what the nuance of the word may or may not mean to us, the reader, as we read the story.
We can guarantee that it's going to change throughout the story.
Yeah. All right, we are going to go to the story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, we're going to start our reading. Please have your worksheet available and your reading material available so you can read along with me as we go. A little bit of a quick recap. The story takes place in India during the British ruling time, and it's about these two Indian guys and an Indian doctor in India. So as we read through the first chunk of the story, consider the first question, which says, how does the setting, place, and time affect the story? So I'm going to start reading Poison by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl. I have a little bit of trouble saying his name. It's a little tricky. It must have been around midnight when I drove home, and as I approached the gates of the bungalow, I switched off the headlamps of the car so the beam wouldn't swing in through the window of the side bedroom and wake Harry Pope. But I needn't have bothered. Coming up the drive, I noticed his light was still on. So he was awake anyway, unless perhaps he had dropped off while reading. I parked the car and went up the 5 steps to the balcony, counting each step carefully in the dark, so I wouldn't take an extra step, which wasn't there when I got to the top. I crossed the balcony, pushed through the screen doors and into the house itself, and switched on the light in the hall. I went across the door of Harry's room, opened it quietly and looked in. He was lying on his bed, and I could see that he was awake. But he didn't move. He didn't even turn his head towards me, but I heard him say, "Timber, Timber, come here." He spoke slowly, whispering each word carefully, separately, and I pushed the door right open and started to go quickly across the room. "Stop! Timber, wait a moment, Timber." I could hardly hear what he was saying. He seemed to be straining enormously to get the words out. "What's the matter, Harry?" "Shh," he whispered. "Shh, for God's sake, don't make a noise. Take your shoes off before you come nearer. Please do as I say, Timber." The way he was speaking reminded me of George Barling after he got shot in the stomach when he stood leaning against a crate containing a spare aeroplane engine, holding both hands to his stomach and saying things about the German pilot in just the same hoarse, straining half-whisper. Harry was using it now. "Quickly, Timber, take off your shoes. Off first." I couldn't understand about taking off the shoes, but I figured that if he was ill, as ill as he sounded, I'd better humor him. So I bent down and removed the shoes and left them in the middle of the floor. Then I went over to his bed. "Don't touch the bed. For God's sake, don't touch the bed." He was still speaking as if he'd been shot in the stomach, and I could see him lying there on his back with a single sheet covering 3/4 of his body. He was wearing a pair of pajamas with blue, brown, and white stripes. He was sweating terribly. It was a hot night, and I was sweating a little myself, but not like Harry. His whole face was wet, and the pillow around his head was sodden with moisture. It looked like a bad case of malaria to me. "What is it, Harry?" "A crate," he said. "A crate. Oh my God, where'd it bite you? How long ago?" "Shut up," he whispered. So this very tense situation, and as you realize, Harry believes there's a snake laying on his stomach, so he's holding very still, and they're both whispering back and forth. So he says, "Shut up." "Listen, Harry," I said. I leaned forward and touched his shoulder. "We've got to be quick. Come on now, quickly. Tell me where it bit you." He was lying there very still and tense, as though he was holding on to himself hard because of sharp pain. "I haven't been bitten," he whispered. "Not yet. It's on my stomach, lying there asleep." I took a quick pace backwards. I couldn't help it, and I stared at his stomach, or rather at the sheet that covered it. The sheet was rumpled in several places, and it was impossible to tell if there was anything underneath. "You don't really mean there's a crate lying on your stomach now?" "I swear it." "How'd it get there?" I shouldn't have asked the question because it was easy to see he wasn't fooling. I should have told him to keep quiet. "I was reading," Harry said, and he spoke very slowly, taking each word in turn and speaking it carefully so as not to move the muscles of his stomach. "Lying on my back, reading, and I felt something on my chest, behind the book, soft of tickling. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this little crate sliding over my pajamas, small, about 10 inches. Knew I mustn't move, couldn't have anyways. Lay there watching it, thought it would go over the top of the sheet." Harry paused and was silent for a few moments. His eyes looked down along his body towards the place where the sheet covered his stomach, and I could see he was watching to make sure his whispering wasn't disturbing the thing that lay there. "There was a fold in the sheet," he said, speaking more slowly than ever now, and so softly I had to lean close to hear him. "See it? It's still there. It went under that. I could feel it through my pajamas moving on my stomach. Then it stopped moving, and now it's lying there in the warmth, probably asleep. I've been waiting for you." Harry raised his eyes and looked at me. "How long ago?" "Hours," he whispered. "Hours and bloody hours and hours. I can't keep still much longer. I've been wanting to cough." There was not much doubt about the truth in Harry's story, but as a matter of fact, it wasn't a surprising thing for a crate to do. They hang around people's houses, and they go for warm places. The surprising thing was that Harry hadn't been bitten. The bite is quite deadly. Except sometimes when you catch it at once, and they kill a fair number of people each year in Bengal, mostly in the villages. "All right, Harry," I said, and now I was whispering too. Don't move, don't talk anymore unless you have to. You know it won't bite unless it's frightened. We'll fix it in no time. I went softly out of the room in my stocking feet and fetched a small sharp knife from the kitchen. I put it in my trouser pocket, ready to use instantly in case something went wrong. While we were still thinking out a plan, if Harry coughed or moved or did something to frighten the crate and got bitten, I was going to be ready to cut the bitten place and try to suck out the venom. I guess that's the thing that they did back in the day. If you get bit by a snake, they cut where it bit and suck out the venom. Consult a doctor about the accuracy of that practice. I don't think it's the best way to go about it. I came back to the bedroom, and Harry was still lying there, very quiet and sweating all over his face. His eyes followed me as I moved across the room to his bed, and I could see he was wondering what I'd been up to. I stood beside him, trying to think of the best thing to do. "Harry," I said, and now when I spoke, I put my mouth almost to his ear so I wouldn't have to raise my voice above the softest whisper. "I think the best thing to do is for me to draw the sheet back very, very gently. Then we could have a look first. I think I could do that without disturbing it. Don't be a damn fool." There was no expression in his voice. He spoke each word too slowly, too carefully, too softly for that. The expression was in his eyes and around the corners of his mouth. "Why not? The light would frighten him. It's dark under there now. Then how about whipping back the sheet back quick and brushing it off before it has time to strike?" "Why don't you get the doctor?" Harry said. The way he looked at me told me I should have thought of that myself in the first place. "A doctor, of course. That's it. I'll get Ganderby." I tiptoed out to the hall and looked up Ganderby's number in the book, lifted the phone, and told the operator to hurry. "Dr. Ganderby," I said. "This is Timber Woods." "Hello, Mr. Woods. You're not in bed yet. Look, could you come around at once and bring serum for a crate bite? Who's been bitten?" The question came so sharply it was like a small explosion in my ear. "No one. Not yet. But Harry Pope's in bed, and he's got one lying on his stomach, asleep under the sheet on his stomach." For about 3 seconds there was silence on the line. Then, speaking slowly, not like an explosion, but now slowly and precisely, Ganderby said, "Tell him to keep quite still. He is not to move or to talk. Do you understand?" "Of course. I'll come at once." He rang off, and I went back to the bedroom. Harry's eyes watched me as I walked across his bed. "Ganderby's coming. He said for you to lie still." "What in God's name does he think I'm doing?" "Look, Harry." He said no talking, absolutely no talking, either of us. "Why don't you shut up then?" When he said this, one side of his mouth started twitching with rapid little downward movements. That continued for a while after he finished speaking. I took out my handkerchief and very gently I wiped the sweat off his face and neck, and I could feel the slight twitching of muscle, the one that's used for smiling. As my fingers passed over it with the handkerchief, I slipped out to the kitchen, got some ice from the ice box, rolled it up in a napkin, and began to crush it small. That business of the mouth, I didn't like that, or the way he talked either. I carried the ice pack to the bedroom and laid it across Harry's forehead. So Harry's jaw is like twitching. He's like very. It's understandable. He's got a snake on him, but he's very uptight, and the narrator's saying he doesn't like the way that Harry talks to him. And Harry definitely, it's understandable that he would be impatient in this situation, but he definitely doesn't come across as a super nice guy, especially when you consider his friend is risking his life to take care of him because this snake is so venomous. "Keep your cool." He screwed up his eyes and drew breath sharply through his teeth. "Take it away," he whispered. It'll make me cough. His smiling muscle began to twitch again. The beam of a headlamp shone through the window as Ganderbai's car swung around to the front of the bungalow. I went out to meet him, holding the ice pack with both hands. "How is it?" Ganderbai asked. But he didn't stop to talk. He walked on past me across the balcony and through the screen doors into the hall. "Where is he? Which room?" He put his bag down on a chair in the hall and followed me into Harry's room. He was wearing soft-soled bedroom slippers, and he walked across the floor noiselessly, delicately, like a careful cat. Harry watched him out of the sides of his eyes. When Ganderbai reached the bed, he looked down at Harry and smiled, confident and reassuring, nodding his head to tell Harry it was a simple matter and that he was not to worry, but just leave it to Dr. Ganderbai. Then he turned and went back to the hall, and I followed him. "First thing is to try to get some serum into him," he said, and opened his bag and started to make preparations. "Intravenously, but I must do it neatly. Don't want to make him flinch." We went into the kitchen, and he sterilized the needle. He had a hypodermic syringe in one hand and a small bottle in the other, and he stuck the needle through the rubber top of the bottle and began drawing a pale yellow liquid up into the syringe by pulling out the plunger. Then he handed the syringe to me. "Hold that till I ask for it." He picked up the bag, and together we returned to the room. Harry's eyes were bright now and wide open. Ganderbai bent over Harry and very cautiously, like a man handling a 16th century lace, he rolled up the pajama sleeve to the elbow without moving the arm. I noticed he stood well away from the bed. He whispered, "I'm going to give you an injection. Serum, just a prick, but try not to move. Don't tighten your stomach muscles. Let them go limp." Harry looked at the syringe. Ganderbai took a piece of red rubber tubing from his bag and slid one end under and up around Harry's biceps. Then he tied the rubber tubing tight with a knot. He sponged a small area of bare forearm with alcohol, handed the swab to me, and took the syringe from my hand. He held it up to the light, squinting at the calibrations, squirting out some yellow fluid. I stood still beside him, watching. Harry was watching too, and sweating all over his face, so it shone like it was smeared thick with face cream, melting on his skin and running down the pillow. I could see the blue vein on the inside of Harry's forearm, swollen now because of the tourniquet, and then I saw the needle above the vein. Ganderbai holding the syringe almost flat against the arm, sliding the needle in sideways through the skin into the blue vein, sliding it slowly but firmly. It went in smooth as into cheese. Harry looked at the ceiling and closed his eyes and opened them again, and he didn't move. When it was finished, Ganderbai leaned forward, putting his mouth close to Harry's ear. "Now you'll be all right, even if you're bitten. But don't move. Please don't move. I'll be back in a moment." He picked up his bag and went out to the hall, and I followed. So let's think about these first two questions. How does setting, place, and time affect the story? So think about where they are, India, and think about the problem that they're facing, this snake, and then think about the time, medicine back then, I'm assuming this is pre-World War II because the British Empire began to fall apart after that. But even then, 50, 60 years ago, medicine was a lot different. Snake bites were a lot serious, and this type of snake isn't in America. So this plot is really affected by the setting. And then the other question, what would you do in Harry's situation? If you're lying there and there's a snake on you, it's easy to say I would be calm. I might freak out. I would hope I'd be nicer to my friend, but it's an interesting situation. So those are quick answers. And then let's talk about the third question. How does the author build tension in the story when he describes the needle going in and injecting Harry with the serum and all the different ways that this really feels like a tense situation? And also a lot of times the dialogue kind of comes at you really fast. The whispering of Harry and the way that they're all talking really fast, things kind of blur together. And I think that creates like a heightened sense of urgency. But you think about that. How does the author build tension in this story? So take a second to answer those first 3 questions. You can pause the video, and then we're going to keep on going. Hey, we're interrupting the reading really quick from our sponsors, with a word from our sponsors, Really Bad Jokes.
Really bad jokes. Stupid jokes. But they're for you, so it's okay.
So, hey, do you want to hear a joke about construction?
I love construction jokes. What do you have?
I'm still working on it.
Hey, Mr. Meyer, I was over at the graveyard the other day, and I tell you what, it sure looked crowded.
Crowded. People must be dying to get in there.
Dying to get in there.
Hey, what do you call a fish that's got 2 knees?
2 knees, would I call that a bass?
A 2-knee fish.
2-knee fish. Mr. Meyer, I had a kid who refused to sleep during nap time the other day. Do you know what they're guilty of?
I don't know. Not napping?
Resisting arrest.
Oh.
Almost happened to me.
Hey, my friend keeps saying, cheer up, man. It could be worse. You could be stuck underground in a hole full of water.
Yeah, but you know he means well.
You got the next one.
Tell me, Mr. Meyer, did you hear about the Scarecrow who won an award?
I did not hear about the Scarecrow that won the award.
Yeah, he won the award because he's outstanding in his field.
Why do skeletons never go trick-or-treating?
I don't know. Please do tell.
They've got no body to go with. And that's it. We're going back to the reading. This has been a word from our sponsor, Really Bad Jokes.
Really, really bad jokes.
Is he safe now? I asked. No. How safe is he? The little Indian doctor stood in the hall, rubbing his lower lip. It must give him some protection, mustn't it? I asked. He turned and walked to the screen doors that led to the veranda. I thought he was going to go through them, but he stopped this side of the doors and stood looking out into the night. Isn't the serum any good? I asked. Unfortunately not. So the doctor kind of calmed him down and was nice to him by giving him the serum, but the serum isn't going to be enough to solve the whole problem. Unfortunately not, he answered without turning around. It might save him, it might not. I'm trying to think of something else to do. Shall we draw the sheet back quick and brush it off before it has time to strike? Never. We are not entitled to take a risk. He spoke sharply, and his voice was pitched a little higher than usual. We can't very well leave him lying there, I said. He's getting nervous. Please, please, he said. The doctor said, turning around, holding up both hands in the air. Not so fast, please. This is not a matter to rush into bald-headed. He wiped his forehead with his handkerchief and stood there, frowning, nibbling his lip. You see, he said at last, there is a way to do this. You know what we must do. We must administer an anesthetic to the creature where it lies. It was a splendid idea. It's not safe, he continued, because the snake is cold-blooded and anesthetic does not work so well or so quick with such animals, but it is better than any other thing that we could do. We could use either chloroform. He was speaking slowly and trying to think the thing out while he talked. Which shall we use? Chloroform, he said suddenly. Ordinary chloroform? That is best. Now quick. He took my arm and pulled me towards the balcony. Drive to my house. By the time you get there, I will have waked up my boy on the telephone. And he will show you my poisons cupboard. Here is the key to the cupboard. Take the bottle of chloroform. It has an orange label, and the name is printed on it. I'll stay here in case anything happens. Be quick now, hurry. No, you don't need your shoes. I drove as fast as I could about 15 minutes, and I was back with the chloroform. So chloroform is something that you can use to put something to sleep or make it pass out. So it's like a poison. So they have this poison now. Ganderby came out of Harry's room, and he met me in the hall. "You've got it," he said. Good, good. I've just been telling him what we are going to be doing. Now, we must hurry. It is not easy for him in there like that all this time. I'm afraid he might move." He went back to the bedroom, and I followed, carrying the bottle carefully with both hands. Harry was lying on the bed in precisely the same position as before, with the sweat pouring down his cheeks. His face was white and wet. He turned his eyes towards me, and I smiled at him and nodded confidently. He continued to look at me. I raised my thumb, giving him the OK signal. He closed his eyes. Ganderby was squatting down by the bed, and on the floor beside him was the hollow rubber tube that he had previously used as a tourniquet. That's the tube he tied around his arm when he injected him with the serum. And he got a small paper funnel and fitted it into one end of the tube. He began to pull a little piece of sheet out from under the mattress. He was working directly in line with Harry's stomach, about 18 inches from it, and I watched his fingers as they tugged gently at the edge of the sheet. He worked so slowly it was almost impossible to discern any movement, either in his fingers or in the sheet that was being pulled. Finally, he succeeded in making an opening under the sheet, and the sheet that he took the rubber tube and inserted one end of it in the opening so that it would slide under the sheet along the mattress towards Harry's body. So he's lifted up part of the sheet and he slid the tube under it, and then he's got the paper funnel on the other end. So he's kind of got a funnel with a tube going under the sheet, just to give you a visual. I do not know how long it took him to slide that tube in a few inches. It may have been 20 minutes. It may have been 40. I never once saw the tube moving. I knew it was going in because the visible part of it grew gradually shorter, but I doubted that the crate could have felt even the faintest vibration. Ganderby himself was sweating now, large pearls of sweat standing out all over his forehead and along his upper lip. But his hands were steady, and I noticed that his eyes were watching, not the tube in his hands, but the area of the crumpled sheet above Harry's stomach. Without looking up, he held out a hand for me to hand him the chloroform. I twisted out the ground glass stopper and put the bottle right into his hand, not letting go till I was sure he had a good hold of it. Then he jerked his head for me to get closer, and he whispered, "Tell him I'm going to soak the mattress, and that it will be very cold under his body. He must be ready for that, and he must not move. Tell him now." I bent over Harry and passed the message. "Why doesn't he get on with it?" Harry said. "He's going to now, Harry, but it'll feel very cold, so be ready for it. Oh God Almighty, just get on. For the first time, he raised his voice, and Ganderby glanced up sharply and watched him for a few seconds, then went back to his business. Ganderby poured a few drops of chloroform into the paper funnel and waited while it ran down the tube. Then he poured in more. Then he waited again, and the heavy, sickening smell of chloroform spread out over the room, bringing with it faint, unpleasant memories of white-coated nurses and white surgeons standing in a room around a long white table. Ganderby was pouring steadily now, and I could see the heavy vapor of the chloroform swirling slowly, like smoke above the paper funnel. He paused, held the bottle up to the light, poured one more funnelful, and handed the bottle back to me. Slowly he drew out the rubber tube from under the sheet. Then he stood up. The strain of inserting the tube and pouring the chloroform must have been great, and I recollect that when Ganderby turned and whispered to me, his voice was small and tired. "We'll give it 15 minutes, just to be safe." He leaned over to tell Harry, "We're going to give it 15 minutes just to be safe. It's probably done for already." So they poured the poison under the bed sheets, and they can smell it, but the sheet is kind of separating them from the chloroform, but the snake can breathe it in. So their hope is that they're kind of poisoning the snake by poisoning the air under the bed sheet. So it's probably done already. Then why, for God's sake, don't you look and see? Again he spoke loudly, and Ganderbai sprang around his small brown face, suddenly very angry. So Harry's kind of being short with the doctor, and the doctor is in a way really risking his life. He's like getting very close to him physically and pouring the poison under the sheet and injecting him when any of them could be bitten by the snake. So Harry's not being a very nice guy to this doctor. Dr. Ganderbai is suddenly very angry. He had almost pure black eyes when he stared at Harry, and Harry's smiling muscle started to twitch. I took my handkerchief and wiped his wet face, trying to stroke his forehead a little for comfort as I did so. Then we stood and waited beside the bed, Ganderbai watching Harry's face all the time in a curious, intense manner. The little Indian was concentrating all his power on keeping Harry quiet. He never once took his eyes from the patient, although he made no sound. He seemed somehow to be shouting at him all the time, saying, "Now listen, you've got to listen. You're not going to go spoiling this now. Do you hear me?" And Harry lay there, twitching his mouth, sweating, closing his eyes and opening them, looking at me and at the sheet and at the ceiling and at me again, but never at Ganderbai. Yet somehow Ganderbai was holding him. The smell of the chloroform was oppressive, and it made me feel sick, but I couldn't leave the room now. I had the feeling somehow that someone was blowing up a huge balloon, and I could see it was going to burst, but I couldn't look away. So this is a very tense situation. Ganderbai is looking at him and like really kind of saying like, calm down, like angrily, like staring at him, and Harry's looking everywhere else and his jaw is twitching, and it's a very tense situation. At length Ganderbai turned and nodded, and I knew he was ready to proceed. You go over to the other side of the bed, he said. We will each take one side of the sheet and draw it back together, but very slowly, please, and very quietly. Keep still now, Harry, I said, and I went around to the other side of the bed and took hold of the sheet. Ganderbai stood opposite me, and together we began to draw back the sheet, lifting it up clear of Harry's body, taking it back very slowly, both of us standing well away, but at the same time bending forward, trying to peer underneath it. The smell of chloroform was awful. I remember trying to hold my breath, and when I couldn't do that any longer, I tried to breathe shallow and slow so the stuff couldn't get into my lungs. The whole of Harry's chest was visible now, or rather the striped pajama top that was covering it, and then I saw the white cord of his pajama trousers, neatly tied in a bow. A little further I saw a button, a mother-of-pearl button. That was something I had never had on my pajamas, a fly button, let alone a mother-of-pearl one. This Harry, I thought, he's very refined. So Harry's got nice pajamas, very luxurious. It is odd how one sometimes has frivolous thoughts as exciting moments are happening. And I distinctly remember thinking about Harry being very refined when I saw that button. Apart from the button, there was nothing on his stomach. We pulled the sheet back faster then, and when we uncovered his legs and feet, we let the sheet drop over the end of the bed to the floor. "Don't move," Ganderbai said. "Don't move, Mr. Pope." And he began to peer around along the side of Harry's body and under his legs. "We must be careful," he said. "It may be anywhere. It could be up the leg of his pajamas." When Ganderbai said this, Harry quickly raised his head from the pillow and looked down at his legs. It was the first time he had moved. Ganderbai said not to move, and Harry still moved. Then suddenly he jumped up, stood up on his bed, and shook his legs, one after the other, violently in the air. At that moment, we both thought he had been bitten, and Ganderbai was already reaching down in his bag for the scalpel and a tourniquet when Harry ceased his caperings and stood still and looked at the mattress he was standing on and shouted, It's not there. Ganderby straightened up for a moment, and he too looked at the mattress. Then he looked up at Harry. Harry was all right. He hadn't been bitten, and now he wasn't going to get bitten, and he wasn't going to be killed, and everything was fine. But that didn't seem to make anyone feel any better. Mr. Pope, you are of course quite sure that you saw it in the first place. There was a note of sarcasm in Ganderby's voice that he would never have employed in ordinary circumstances. You don't think you might possibly have been dreaming, do you, Mr. Pope? The way Ganderby was looking at Harry, I realized that the sarcasm was not seriously intended. He was only easing up a little bit after strain. So Ganderby risks his life to help Harry, and this is a very strenuous situation, and there's no snake. And he's just a little bit questioning, a little bit sarcastic towards Harry, who you would think would be grateful for what Ganderby's done. And so let's see what happens. Harry stood on his bed in his striped pajamas, glaring at Ganderby, and the color began to spread all over his cheeks. "Are you telling me I'm a liar?" he shouted. Ganderby remained absolutely still, watching Harry. Harry took a pace forward on the bed, and there was a shiny look in his eyes. "Why, you dirty little Hindu sewer rat." "Shut up, Harry," I said. "You dirty black—" "Harry," I called. "Shut up, Harry." It was terrible, the things he was saying. Ganderby went out of the room, as though neither of us was there, and I followed him, and I put my arm around his shoulder as we walked across the hall and out onto the balcony. Don't you listen to Harry," I said. "This thing's just made him so he doesn't know what he's saying." We went down the steps from the balcony to the drive and across the drive in the darkness to where the old Morris car was parked. He opened the door and got in. "You did a wonderful job," I said. "Thank you so very much for coming." "All he needs is a good holiday," Mr. Ganderby said quietly without looking at me. Then he started the engine and drove off. So Harry at the end went into this racist rant and was really hateful towards the doctor who had risked his life to save him. Surprising conclusion. It's a strange way to end the story. So the last two questions say, what might the author be referring to by the title Poison? Explain your answer. So there's poison that they pour under the bed sheet. There's the poison in the snake. And there's another type of poison, the poisonous thoughts and words that Harry brings out. So you can think about what happened in the story and answer that question for yourselves. And did the ending surprise you? Explain your answer. So were you surprised that Harry turned out to be a jerk? Did you expect him to get bit? Did none of it surprise you and you knew it was kind of going to go this way? So think about those questions, answer them as best you can, send them to us, and thank you for listening, and email us if you have any questions. Thank you.
That was a beautiful reading, Mr. Meyer. I sure appreciate you doing that.
I'm trying. You know, he makes it look easy. It's pretty hard to do a reading like that, but, you know, we got through it.
Yeah, when you're as old as me and you've read a story about 75 times, it just is there, right?
Yeah. It's impressive. So that story, Poison, what do you think, Mr. Long? What is the title possibly referring to?
You know, Mr. Meyer, when I first read that story, I thought that the poison was referring to the crate, which is a snake.
Yeah, and they kind of trick you. And then it goes a little bit further. The poison might be the chloroform, right?
Yeah, he does get injected with a needle, and there is chloroform, which is something to put things to sleep. And so it starts off, it's the crate, and then it's the crate and the chloroform, and then
the real poison turns out to be the words and the racism in Harry's heart. Ultimately, at the end, that's how I took it to be at the end.
So we always try to make the stories make sense in our modern world, and we all say things that aren't very nice sometimes, and I see it a lot at school, and you see it on social media, and there's an old saying that goes, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me."
Yeah.
To that effect. That's not true. Words are powerful tools. And when you have names for people that they don't appreciate, it is hurtful. And in this story, dirty little sewer rat, that's not a compliment. And so the poison shifts all the way to the poison of our words, how they can poison your heart.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the doctor went so far out of his way to help and potentially risk his own life to help this guy, and the guy just... It alludes to it with the twitching of the jaw and the way that he talks to people. At first, I thought it was because he's under stress because of this snake, but the twitching of the jaw and the way that he talks to people, he really is an angry dude.
There's also poison in his own heart, right? And that poison can infect you.
Yeah.
And being cruel to people, it doesn't make you feel better, right? It is a poison that gets inside you. I will tell you what makes you feel better. Kindness, sympathy, empathy, trying to understand what somebody's going through. That's much better than the poison of words, anger, angry words, right?
Yeah. So, quick little recap over our questions that go along with this reading. How does the setting, place, and time affect the story? So, there's no wrong answer. You could say we don't have crate snakes in America, so it couldn't be set in America. You could think of something like that.
Yeah, because what kind of snakes do we have here? Gardener snakes?
Rattler snakes?
Rattlesnake.
Yeah.
Right? But if that was a rattlesnake, then you would hear the rattling, so that wouldn't work.
Next question is, what would you do in Harry's situation? Personally, I would cry if I thought a snake was on my chest when I woke up.
Let's just say I hope I would be wearing a diaper.
How does the author build tension in the story? Think of any moment in the story that you felt built up some tension. And honestly, if you want to say that the author didn't build up tension, say how they could have built up tension. If you're like, you know what, I play Fortnite, I'm not scared of anything, so this wasn't a tense story for me. Explain how the author could have built up tension if you want to go outside of the box with that one. Fair?
Fortnite?
Yeah, Fortnite, the most intense experience anyone could ever have.
See, now as an English teacher, a fortnight is 20 nights. So does the game take like 20 days to play?
Like 20 minutes. And it's not really at night. It's like you build forts at like dusk for 20 minutes.
Do you build like castles?
No, you kind of like build planks of wood in the air and like run on them. It's Fortnite.
I've been playing a little Legend of Zelda lately. Is it like that?
No.
I still have my Nintendo NES.
So going to the next one. What might the author be referring to by the title Poison? Explain your answer. So, a lot of opportunities. Poison in the snake, chloroform, poison in the heart, all that stuff. And then the last one, did the ending surprise you? Explain your answer. Say if you were surprised by the guy being racist or not. It's your decision. If you were surprised or not, just explain.
You could also, if you want to give it your own little twist, a time where you were a victim of poison, Don't name names, please. But this kind of stuff happens to all of us all the time. And it's hurtful. And let's try to spin this into a good thing. When you come back to school, whenever that may be, hopefully sooner than later, please realize that you should say kind words, okay? And, Mr. Meyer, I was talking to my wife about this story last night, and many of you will remember me standing at the door and saying hello, and sometimes people would say, "How are you?" And I would say, "I'm great. I was not hit by a bus last night." And there would be the snicker, and there, "You're dumb," and people would walk in. We were all hit by a bus, right? Isolation cancel of schools, many of us struggling with money issues, depression, anxiety issues. We've been hit by a bus. So when you go out, after this is done, and you go out into the world, and someone asks you, how are you doing? I'm doing great because I was not hit by a bus. You know what I'm saying? Now you might understand what I was talking about.
Yeah. And with nuances of words, this story being about Poison, on another note, reminded me of Poison, the totally rad 80s band. And thinking about that band and this story really inspired me to, it's another week, and I think it's time for another song.
You took me back to when I got my driver's license and cassette tapes and my friends and I piling in the car I was driving at the time and cruising around and listening to big hair metal bands.
Rock on.
Thank you for that. You put a smile on my face. So with that, did you just say you wrote another song?
Yeah, the song, the story being about doctors and doctors in the world today doing a lot of work, really inspired me.
Do we get a song every week?
I think so, yeah. I'll talk to my agent. We'll see.
Thank you. Hey, without further ado, let's listen to your new song.
All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. I hope y'all enjoyed the story this week. It being about a guy and a doctor and a snake, it really inspired me to write a song sharing the message that we should all be nice to doctors. So this song is called Be Nice to Doctors. Be nice to doctors. Be nice to doctors. This is the advice that I have to offer. Be nice to doctors. You never know when you might wind up with a snake bite, and you'll need someone other than Trevor. You'll need medical help, and you certainly can't help yourself. So take this advice and remember, be nice to doctors. Be nice to doctors. This is the advice that I have to offer. Be nice to doctors. So be nice to doctors. So everyone, remember, be nice to each other and be nice to doctors.
I love that song, and thank you for tuning in with another A Moment With, where we discuss the story and your life.
Yeah. Thanks for spending another moment with us. Now we're going to move on to the
Field trip?
field trip. Here we go.
Oh, wait. Don't cut yet. Stop. Funniest story in the world. We drove down to Spokane together, and on our way down, right outside of Chewelah, past Spoko Fuel.
You wouldn't believe it, but this guy got us pulled over.
65 and a 55. So we the red and blues on behind us, and so we end up pulling over and looking out the rearview mirror and seeing the state troopers. Shout out to state troopers. Thanks for keeping us safe, first responders. And the state trooper walked up to us, and we rolled down the window.
And that guy looks at us for a second, and he goes, are you Mr. Long and Mr. Meyer?
Yeah, We were like, yeah. And he said, my favorite movie is Shrek also.
Yeah, it turns out he's a fan of the show. He just wanted to talk to us about the show.
We did not get a ticket, but we did get a nice conversation, and he wants us to keep up the good work. And it was very nice to hear how popular we truly are.
And it was nice to hear how popular Shrek is, my favorite movie.
But we're just here to help you. We are not going to let our heads get too big over being recognized out in public. Next, we'll have paparazzi, I suppose. I don't know what I'll do about that, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But, yeah, so on to the field trip.
On to the field trip. Hey, guys, here we are on our field trip at the mall, checking it out.
You can see that it's pretty empty out there. There aren't any cars. There's not really anybody around. We thought you might want to see it, but it's actually kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer. I remember when the mall used to be super cool with an arcade and a Pokemon card shop down in the basement, but I guess now it's just a Chili's that no one goes to.
Yeah, you can see coming up, they're not after us. We have a Chili's right there, and in a second it's going to pan around, and you can see they're not even making deliveries here. So there's Northtown Mall. Not much going on.
Yeah, so if you're looking to get out, I wouldn't recommend going to Northtown Mall because it's rather boring.